All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to demystify what is arguably one of the most incredibly dense, but honestly deeply rewarding philosophies out there, Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari's absolute masterpiece, A Thousand Plateaus. If you've ever felt like traditional ways of thinking are just a bit too rigid or boxed in, well, you are absolutely in for a treat today. We're about to unpack a completely revolutionary way of looking at the world, mapping out their genius as we go. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the nomad philosophy, the arborescent tree model, the concept of the rhizome, its 6 core principles, the clash between maps and tracings, and finally, a conclusion on finding your plateau. So Capitalism and Schizophrenia is actually the subtitle of the massive, broader project that A Thousand Plateaus belongs to. And what this text does is fundamentally attack traditional representational thinking. Deleuze and Guattari draw this sharp contrast between what they call rigid state philosophy, which is all about fixed identities, universal truths, and established order, and this incredibly liberating, chaotic concept they call nomad thought. Nomad thought doesn't trap itself in some closed equation. It moves freely. It's really a philosophy of the outside.
Section 1. The arborescent tree model, the philosophy of the root.
To really grasp what nomad thought is, we first have to figure out what it isn't. Traditional Western thought relies heavily on a rigid, top-down tree structure. Think about it for a second. You've got roots, a trunk, branches. It operates on binary logic, this idea that 1 becomes 2 and then 2 become 4 to categorize the whole world. It's strictly hierarchical. Everything has a rank, a higher unity, or some central pivot point. Deleuze and Guattari argue that this arborescent, or tree-like model, is the ultimate representation of state philosophy. It's sedentary, it's fixed in place, and honestly, it just endlessly traces and reproduces the exact same old structures. And hey, this isn't just about biology or some obscure philosophical debate. The authors argue that even our most advanced modern disciplines are essentially infected by this tree virus. Just look at linguistics under Noam Chomsky. He uses these grammatical trees that start at a single point and branch out. Or look at psychoanalysis under Freud, which traces all our complicated desires back to a single, rooted family complex. Deleuze and Guattari argue that these disciplines act like dictatorial trees. They organize the mind and language into strict, immovable hierarchies, where you are always subordinate to some central root. This really gets to the core clash of our explainer. On the left side, we have the military-like logic and order of the arborescent tree. It's hierarchical, it's binary, and it's totally obsessed with deep structures and tracing the past. But then, on the right side, we have the radical alternative, the chaotic, interconnected freedom of the rhizome. It's acentered, it's completely flat, it's based on multiplicities, and it acts as an open map. And let me tell you, the authors basically want to take an axe to the left side.
Section 2. Enter the rhizome. Nomad thought.
Having established the really limiting, almost suffocating problem of the tree, let's explore that radical alternative. In nature, rhizomes are things like crabgrass, potato tubers, or even a swarming rat burrow. Unlike a tree with its big central trunk, a rhizome is a subterranean stem that continuously grows in all directions. It has no central root, no pivot, no beginning, and absolutely no end. It simply pushes outward. It's a decentralized, non-hierarchical multiplicity. If a tree is like a rigid general commanding an army, a rhizome is a swarm of ants operating completely without a central commander. And what's incredibly fun about this is that the authors actually practice exactly what they preach. They visually intertwine their names and treat their own identity as a rhizome. In their own words, they actually point out that because they wrote this book together, and since each of them is several, there was already quite a crowd. They essentially strip away their own egos as individual, centralized authors to become this fluid, networked multiplicity. Section 3. 6 Principles of Rhizomes. Now, to actually make sense of this wonderfully chaotic concept, we need to break down the specific rules governing how it operates in the wild. While the rhizome itself is, by definition, wild and untamed, placing its 6 distinct principles into a clean list gives us a fantastic cognitive anchor to hold on to. We've got connection, heterogeneity, multiplicity, asignifying rupture, cartography, and decalcomonia. Let's walk through these in pairs and see how they just totally upend that old tree model.
Principles 1 and 2 are connection and heterogeneity. Unlike a tree that fixes an order and only links similar branches together, a rhizome insists that any point can and must be connected to anything else. It connects entirely different regimes of science. A rhizome doesn't care about our neat little categories. It'll happily link biological, political, and economic codes all together. It's an essentially heterogeneous reality. Think of language. It's not a rigid tree. It's really just a massive throng of dialects and slangs constantly bleeding into one another.
Moving on, principles 3 and 4 are multiplicity and awe-signifying rupture. A rhizome is completely flat. It's only made of dimensions, absolutely no central pivot points. And here is the best part. If you shatter or break a rhizome at a given spot, it doesn't just die like a chopped-down tree. No, it will simply rebound and start right up again on one of its old lines, or maybe on entirely new lines. Think of couchgrass, or that colony of ants again. You can pave right over it, but eventually it will find a crack and break through. That is an awe-signifying rupture. To see how this builds, let's look at this stunning biological example they use, the wasp and the orchid. Now, traditional science might tell you the orchid is just imitating the wasp to get pollinated, right? But Deleuze and Guattari say absolutely not. This isn't imitation. What's happening is two totally different species are forming a shared rhizome through this beautiful cycle of mutual capturing. The orchid becomes the wasp, and the wasp becomes part of the orchid's reproductive system. It's an apparel evolution, basically a block of becoming that links two completely heterogeneous elements together without either one acting as the boss.
Section 4. Maps versus tracings.
This brings us to principles 5 and 6, cartography and decalcomania. And honestly, these serve as the ultimate practical call to action. This is where the philosophy meets your everyday life. Just look at this abstract piano score by Silvano Bussotti. It brilliantly illustrates what an acentered rhizomatic map looks like compared to the rigid traditional tree structure of standard sheet music. It's wild, right? It has multiple entryways, it connects completely disparate points, and it actively invites the performer to experiment rather than just mechanically tracing notes off a page.
And that leads directly to the author's most famous command. Make a map, not a tracing. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that a tracing dangerously limits you. When you trace something, like psychoanalysis tracing your adult behavior back to some childhood complex, you are literally just reproducing past impasses and blockages. But a map? A map is open, connectable, reversible, and entirely oriented toward new experimentation out in the real world. A map has multiple entryways. Tracings must always be put back onto the map.
Section 5, Conclusion, Finding Your Plateau. So, we've covered trees, rhizomes, maps, and tracings. Now let's see how all of these biological metaphors tie back to the actual title of the source text itself. The book is called 1,000 Plateaus, but what exactly is a plateau? Well, drawing on observations of Balinese culture, the authors define a plateau as a continuous, self-vibrating region of intensities. Rather than trying to build up to some massive climax or a final endpoint like traditional Western thought basically always tries to do, a plateau sustains a height of energy. It leaves a dynamic afterimage. You reach a peak, and instead of dropping off, you just ride that intense, sustained energy, and you inject it into other parts of your life to form entirely new rhizomatic connections.
And why is all of this so necessary? Well, because of this incredibly punchy conclusion directly from the authors. Quote, "We're tired of trees. We should stop believing in trees, roots, and radicals. They've made us suffer too much." That really summarizes the absolute necessity of abandoning these rigid, dictatorial ways of thinking that force us into neat, hierarchical boxes and ultimately limit our true potential.
Deleuze and Guattari tell us that a plateau is always in the middle. It's not at the beginning and it's not at the end. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate goal of nomad thought. You want to live right in the middle of the flow. Don't constantly look back to your roots, and definitely don't obsess over some final, transcendent destination. Live in the intermezzo. Constantly connect, constantly become, and constantly build new maps. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to really challenge how you organize your own world, your own projects, and your own mind. When you encounter a new idea, a new relationship, or a new challenge, are you stuck tracing those same old arborescent branches, growing rigid roots into the ground? Or are you ready to act like the weed, to live in the middle, and to map your very own rhizome?